Hello, my name is Akira Patterson, and welcome to our live conversation on your mental health wellness presented by Ariza Credit Union. And just give us a little thumbs up or some heart emojis if you can hear us and the audio is all well. Thank you for your patience. Great. As people, we often focus on things that we can see, things that meet the eye, whether it comes to ourselves or to the people that we meet. Sometimes we'll see someone and think, that person does not look so good. I wonder if they're okay. Or you may even use your own physical appearance as a marker or the measure for your overall wellness, not thinking about things that does not necessarily meet the eye. What about things that we cannot see? What about our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, even chemical balances within our body? These are all important when considering our overall holistic wellness. It's very important that we have conversations like this because although mental wellness is a topic that's gaining a lot of popularity in recent times, it's still very important for us to delve into the deeper issues, the day-to-day issues, and even societal constraints when it comes to talking about our mental health and wellness. Today, we will speak to a counseling psychologist by the name of Josh Hector. He is also the co-founder of Optimal Solutions, a private practice in Grenada that focuses on counseling psychotherapy as well as workshops. He is also an executive member on the board of the Grenada Psychological Association, as well as the Caribbean Alliance of National Psychological Association, CANPA. He has worked in education as well as prison services in Jamaica, Barbados, and Grenada. It is my pleasure to welcome to our conversation, Josh.
Thank you very much, Akira. It's my pleasure to be here.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
And again, because of the connectivity of social media, we'll be looking forward to you sharing your questions with us that we will answer at the end of the conversation segment of today's presentation. So feel free to contact us via the WhatsApp information that's being shared on your screen. We want to keep it anonymous and also make you comfortable so that you can, feel free to access your questions. So Josh, before we head into the thick of things, there's a question that I always think about when considering mental wellness. And that question is there any such thing as a healthy mind?
That's a very interesting question. And what comes to mind immediately is the fact that mental health is on a continuum. And people are at different stages on that continuum. I am afraid to say that there is a healthy mind. Perchance people get complacent with their minds, because the fact is our mental health is something that we actually have to protect.
Right.
We have to work on it daily. But yes, to an extent, a person can have a mind that is definitely functioning at a high level. So mental health can be present. But again, it's still on a continuum.
Right.
Can it be 100%? I don't think it would be safe to say that.
Right, right. Well, that definitely answers my question. I think that, for me, it's very interesting because from time to time, people will think, I'm okay, I feel well today, and some people may think that they're completely, just okay and will be well regardless, but I think as we go along in the conversation, we'll realize that there's a lot more than meets the eye.
Definitely.
In the continuum. So let's dive into some watchwords that I think people are very familiar with when we talk about mental wellness, such as stress, anxiety, depression. But even as an adult, even growing up, stress was a word that I always heard. And it seems to, sometimes even be used so loosely. What is stress?
First of all, can you give me a layman definition of stress?
For me, would be my layman definition would be anything that makes me feel uncomfortable. Any situation that makes me feel uncomfortable, makes me feel like pulling my hair out, I'll define it as a stressful situation.
Okay. You know, I've actually asked people this question before, and I hear a number of things. Some people say stress is a disease or an illness, a sickness. But what stress is, it's actually a natural reaction, right? It's a natural mental, emotional, and physical reaction to real or perceived threats or demands. Let me break that down.
Yes.
Right? And notice I'm saying real or perceived threats or demands. So on the mental level, we have a situation where when the stress reaction comes into play, we find ourselves spiraling into negative thought.
Right.
So we shift from positive thinking to negative thinking. That's what usually happens. And so our emotions actually follow because we think before we feel.
Interesting.
We actually think before we feel, so that if we had a positive emotion before the stressor came to play, then we switch that negative emotion.
Right.
Now, on the physical side, there are physical things that actually take place in your body. So you have stress hormones being secreted, for example.
Right.
What would accompany that would be, might be a change in your breathing, a change in your heart rate.
Right.
Persons might begin to sweat.
And literally feel their heart pounding.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right, and that's the physical impact of the stress, and ultimately it's manifested in a behavior. The way we behave usually says this person is stressed right now.
Right.
If the said person is in control, then they'd be able to handle their behavior. If not, then
right. You'll pull your hair out, and people would obviously
Correct.
notice that you're feeling a bit stressed.
You will wear it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even thinking about stress, I know a lot of the time some people will say stress, and the pressure of stress will bring out the best in them, you know? So sometimes the connotation of it is a little different, you know? People would feel, maybe I'll wait until down to the wire. You have a tendency to procrastinate, and when it gets to that deadline, or you know, you're in that situation and it's abrupt, sometimes great things happen and you're like, okay, stress is a good thing. Is there such a thing?
Well, yeah, that's a good one, because there are two kinds of stress.
Right.
You have what is called distress. You're down and out, you can't see the lights at the end of the tunnel. Financial issues, health issues, those issues tend to cause us to feel distressed.
Right.
That's the bad kind. There's actually a good kind of stress, and that usually comes about when when we have deadlines. For example, when there's something that requires our attention, stress operates as the fuel that pushes us to get that thing done.
Right.
So imagine how an athlete would feel knowing that millions of people worldwide are looking at them in that moment.
Right.
They're actually going to feel a level of stress, but that can actually help them perform.
Right.
Right? So, of course, I don't advocate waiting until the last minute,
And
because so many
procrastinating.
things could go wrong.
Right.
But there is actually a healthy kind of stress that pushes us to get things done.
So we know of that healthy type of stress.
It's called
that you
eustress,
just said.
by the way.
Eustress.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's eustress, not me stress.
Not me
it's
stress.
you stressing me out. That's a good way to look at it,
Okay.
right? But even knowing that eustress exists, and sometimes, you know, we don't necessarily feel too bad about it, because at the end of the day, we're down to the wire, we push, we make it, you know, it works out great. But the other type of stress that you mentioned, distress, let's talk a little bit more about that, and how people recognize and even manage before it gets to a state where it's physically apparent.
Well, you know, I often approach this by starting at this point. Life is stressful. Life actually, there are stressors in life, even without our effort. As a matter of fact, being born is stressful. Now imagine you're comfortable in a spot, it's warm,
Right.
you're fed, and all of a sudden somebody yanks you through a tunnel, and you're suddenly in this new space, a whole lot of stimuli all over the place. You're seeing these people, you're hearing these noises.
It's true.
You begin to cry.
Never thought about it that way.
It's stressful from day one.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are a lot of external distress, external stressors, sorry.
Right.
But I often like to focus on internal stressors.
Right.
Because if we get rid of internal stressors, that would actually help us navigate the external stressors a bit easier.
And what would you say are some of those internal stressors?
So we have negative thinking,
Right.
negative thought patterns. But one I zero in on is, actually before I get to negative thought patterns, and you know what, let me not do this yet because we're getting to the mind in a while. Faulty beliefs. And beliefs in this context would be those steadfast ideas that we hold about life situations. How do you identify those beliefs? Often when someone says something should never happen,
Right.
or it should always happen. Should never happen, must never happen, should always happen. Let me give you an example. And I use this example here a lot because it's relatable. So someone leaves home with the belief that people should always respond when they say hello.
Right. It's true.
It's true.
It's the least. If I say hello, I feel like the least you can do is say hello too.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
So let's paint a picture.
Okay.
Let's create a scenario. I am person one and you're person two.
Okay.
Person one believes that everybody should always say hello or respond when they greet them.
Right.
So they get on the bus in the morning and they say, good morning, everybody. Nobody answers.
I could put myself in person one's shoes.
Okay, let's swap. You're person one.
Yeah.
Right, you're person one.
Yeah.
Okay, nobody answers. But remember, you believe,
Yes.
before this event, you actually believe that everybody should answer.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I feel bad. And I say, good morning
Again.
naturally,
And you might antagonize everybody early in the morning.
early in the morning.
Whose fault is that?
Well, they should have said hello.
Okay, let's carry on.
Just being the devil's
Let's
advocate.
carry on. I'm person number two.
Yes.
But I actually believe that people are in control of themselves. I do my part, and if they don't respond,
Okay. It's neither here nor
I
there.
get on the bus 10 minutes after you and say good morning, everybody, and nobody responds. What happens?
You carry on with your
Life
life.
goes on.
Yeah.
So,
And life goes on in both scenarios.
well, it goes on a bit smoother for me
Okay.
because I didn't get stressed out. I didn't get angry.
Right.
Why? Not because of the scenario, but because of
the
what I
belief.
believe.
And that's very interesting, you know, because it begs a further question of reframing the narratives and thought patterns that we hold dear, because sometimes we grow up, we adopt these values, Josh, from society. I grow up and I come from the womb, I don't have any values inside of my warm, comforty area.
Yeah.
You know, when I come out and I grow and I start, you know, interacting with people, just viewing people, you kind of adapt how you're supposed to behave, you know, what you're supposed to value, what you're not supposed to value. And if I'm from a household where my parents say, you must have manners, you must say hello and good morning, you expect that people will say that as well because you've been conditioned to do that. So how do we address our thought
So here's
patterns
the
and
thing.
beliefs?
You have these values, right? And that's fine. You have this standard. You operate in a certain way. This does not say that you should drop your standard. This says that you should understand that you cannot expect it of everybody else.
So it's the expectation
The expectation.
of what other people are supposed to do in response to you.
Some people expect all the drivers on the road to do the right thing all the time. Okay. Well, here's so let's find a belief here. You actually might believe that the other drivers are perfect. or they should be.
Most likely,
Yeah.
that's where that comes from.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So when they make a mistake, you lose it.
But sometimes I don't feel like they're making a mistake. Sometimes I just feel like drivers are being reckless for being reckless. And I know that people on Facebook right now must have something to say about that.
No.
If you've ever met a bus driver on the Granads route, no disrespect.
So listen, right? Truthfully, there are reckless drivers.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a lot of the drivers who make mistakes are good drivers who just had a bad day.
Yeah.
And you are at the back, you're at the back there expecting that they should be perfect. Now, if that is your expectation, the reality is going to rock your world.
Right.
No, and I could flip it around and say, are you always perfect on the road?
No.
Should they lose it when you make your little mistake?
No. So that's how you address. I saw what you did there. You know, Josh, you just gave me like a psychotherapy lesson.
No.
I love this. You know, I mean, so road rage is not a thing.
Yeah, road rage, it's really about people giving control to external
Right.
elements,
Mm-hmm.
and not recognizing that they have that control within them.
Right.
Nobody should be able, or nothing should be able to touch a button.
Right.
Because where's your button as a human being? I've never seen a button on a
Right.
Well, we have buttons on our clothes, but
Right. But not physically on ourselves.
the buttons are those things that we expect, those things that we believe. And so I call that self-inflicted stress.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, life is stressful enough on its own.
Right.
There are stressors that we have to genuinely deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best if we do not add to that by stressing ourselves.
And cause our own stressors. I think that that is a key point, you know, to even just reiterate, because the fact of the matter is that if you think about it like that, which is the way it actually is, you'll realize a lot of the times you relinquish your power for absolutely no reason, when you could just adjust and understand that people are not coming from the same place that you are coming
Correct.
from, and you could only control yourself, and you leave the rest up to others.
And you're actually in a good mood most of the time.
Yeah.
Because those expectations are actually what you might call premeditated stress. They're just sitting there waiting to happen.
Waiting to be activated.
Yeah.
That's definitely something deep to think about, you know, even moving beyond that. So the fact that we have to deal with our own expectations, our own beliefs, you know, understand that there are things that we can control and there are things that we cannot control. What are the tips you'd recommend for dealing with stress other than those?
So, right on the top of my list would be identifying faulty beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Being honest with yourself and questioning your expectations. And if those expectations are faulty, addressing them.
Right.
Apart from that, I would also recommend learning how to relax. I don't mean sitting down, I don't mean lying down.
Right.
Because you could do those things without relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, signing off. Because the truth is, we are bombarded daily by so much information, so many things. So somewhere in the midst of the chaos, we need to be able to
Right.
relax.
Mm-hmm.
I would also recommend self-care and taking care of yourself in order to remain effective. I like this when you're traveling and the flight attendant is doing the safety procedure. They often say, oxygen will come down from above in case of emergency.
Mm-hmm.
If there is someone in your care, secure your oxygen first of all, and then attend to the person in your care. Why? Because if you're out of breath, you can't help anybody.
Right.
And particularly for parents, for people with children, for people who have persons in their care.
Yeah.
The
And
best
that's-
way to care for them is to care for yourself.
Yeah, but you see, that's interesting because it's almost a knee-jerk reaction if you have a child. I'm just thinking as, you know, as a parent or thinking as a mother, you have a child and, you know, there's a dangerous situation. There are numerous times when I would be driving or I would be in the vehicle with my mom, she's driving, and there's a sudden stop and she juts out her hand to make sure, almost like a knee-jerk reaction to take care of the person before. But
no, of course, those are expected, right? Because sometimes there's a situation and you just have to respond immediately. But I'm talking about in an ongoing, in a continuous kind of way,
right,
ensuring that you look after yourself
and make sure that you are well.
Resting if you're ill, because I've never seen work on the death news yet.
Facts.
Right? Yeah.
Hashtag facts.
I've never seen work on the obituaries, you know?
Yes.
So we need to rest if we are ill, and exercise. What exercise does is actually it actually helps to relieve that stress by actually counteracting the stress hormone, right? And so I always say exercise and stress are enemies, and exercise will always win. A lot of people don't exercise, but it's very important to do so.
Yeah.
And then deep breathing. If you take a deep breath right now, your lungs will be surprised. Why would your lungs be surprised? Because we don't typically do that.
Yeah.
Right? And what deep breathing does is it sends more oxygen to our brains, which actually reduces stress. Like, a deep breath is the difference between knocking somebody out and walking away. Not the hyperventilating people do when they're angry.
Right.
But actually taking a deep breath. Do you know why we yawn?
Other than being tired or sleepy.
Or hungry.
Or hungry.
Right. One of the reasons is actually because our bodies just need more oxygen.
Oh.
And when we're tired, we breathe the laziest.
Interesting.
And so a deep breath is powerful, right? If you sit down, you sit squarely and you take a few deep breaths, you would realize that you immediately feel better than you did before.
I must admit that that's my go-to. Like, there are situations that I can call some. Just yesterday, it was raining. I was coming from the supermarket. I had something in my hand. It fell down. I was thinking, oh my God, this is such a terrible day. And I thought to myself, you know what, Akira? Take a deep breath. Because if you think that way, then the rest of your day may follow through.
Exactly.
I took the deep breath, and it wasn't so bad after all.
Because a terrible moment, is not a terrible day.
It's not a terrible day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's important to understand, and I'm so happy that you said that, because sometimes we let one thing affect the rest of the day, sometimes a week, sometimes a month. You're going, and every time you have a reminder of that, it just irks you and makes you so upset.
We're not being fair to ourselves, because sometimes we're mad at people and they're having a good time. Right? The person that is stressing us out is having a good time. And so we need to take that power back.
Yeah.
So that we can be at peace.
Preach. I love that. Taking back the power.
Yeah.
Because it's all within us.
Of course it is.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
I'm checking out things in my own self. It's very interesting having the conversation, because I'm leading the conversation, but I'm also thinking, okay, this is my session too. All right. I took a deep dive into Optimal Solutions Instagram. If you're not following Optimal Solutions on Instagram, check them out. It's Optimal Solutions GND.
Yes.
At Optimal Solutions GND on Instagram. And while I was scrolling, I saw this one post about anxiety. And it was saying essentially what anxiety looks like. You know, and it was a carousel post, so I was sliding. And while I was sliding, you know, in colloquial terms, a couple things fell in my pot. So I was wondering, do I, you know, have anxiety? Do everybody experience anxiety?
Everybody does. Everybody experiences stress. Everybody experiences anxiety. But when the stress and the anxiety is not managed, when it spirals out of control, then you have things like depression creeping in, for example. And depression is another one of those things that a lot of people talk about. People say, oh, I'm depressed, or this thing is depressing me. Layman terms again. But depression is not that straightforward. At least the average person who says, oh, I'm depressed, so, excuse me, is probably not.
Right.
Depression is actually characterized by a persistent depressed or low mood, and there are symptoms.
Right.
Just about nine symptoms, and in order to diagnose depression, 5 or more of the 9 symptoms have to be present over a 2-week period.
Okay,
persistently.
So oftentimes, you know, some of the depressive states that we may be experiencing is not necessarily that we are depressed or clinically depressed.
It's not that it might not be that we're clinically depressed, but yes, we experience depressed moods or low moods for different reasons. But the criteria must be satisfied in order for us to say that, well, not for us to say,
right.
but in order for depression to be
diagnosed.
And you have symptoms like, well, the depressed mood, which has to persist. You have insomnia, trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, feelings of worthlessness, the significant change in weight, whether gaining or losing weight over a short period. And that usually accompanies either a lack of appetite or an increased appetite due to the depression.
Okay.
You also have diminished ability to think or concentrate. There is also thoughts of dying, but with no plan for suicide. So, I mean, there are a few others, but you actually have to have 5 or more of these present within the same 2-week period in order to have a diagnosis. And there are different disorders, under depressive disorders, but if we focus on the well-known major depression, those are the symptoms which need to be present.
Addressed.
Yeah.
Well, taking into consideration, you know, the present state of the world, the present lives that everyone is experiencing, you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, people's life literally being turned upside down, you know, some people's life coming to a screeching halt, you know, maybe those depressive, you know, indicators that you would have just mentioned, maybe I would not have experienced, or someone would not have experienced all of those or even those prior, but because of that life event, it kind of makes the situation worse. Would that person still be treated the same, or should it still be handled the same as it's a life event that's causing it?
Well, here's the thing. Stress sometimes would present itself in the form of a crisis. Right? And if you look at what makes something stressful, you have things like desirability. How desirable is my circumstance? Controllability. Am I in control of the situation, or is it out of hand? The unknown. And right now, I mean, in particular in relation to COVID-19, it's going to stress people in that way.
Yeah.
But if the stress is not managed well, yes, there is the risk of eventually developing depression.
Yeah.
Because stress serves its purpose in that stress sometimes, even though it's distress, the good side of that might be the fact that it actually tells us to slow down. You're going too much. Take it easy.
Right.
Right? But it should not be present for an extended period.
So it could be a personal indicator that's just our body telling us to check ourselves.
Correct. Or our body saying there's something that you need to address.
Right.
But if it persists and we don't address whatever that thing is, then depression could actually follow.
And you see, that brings me back to the continuum that you spoke about in the beginning.
Yes.
Because everyone will have different points at which they feel, you know, stressed, or these circumstances will cause stress and anxiety. The
truth is, you may even have a symptom or two of major depression.
Right.
But because, momentarily, but because it does not persist, the disorder isn't diagnosed. It's not diagnosed. Right. Simply because it's just acute, as they say.
So let's take a realistic scenario, you know, just in really putting a face on this. Take, for example, you have a father or a husband, a boyfriend that is accustomed to taking care, you know, of his family, providing for his children, even though his wife or his girlfriend, works or whatever. Still consider yourself the primary breadwinner, because how you're socialized, especially in the Caribbean, is to think that males really predominantly think that they take care of certain aspects when it comes to the home. So they go out, they get the money, they get the food, they bring home the bread. And you have a situation as COVID-19 that just, again, turned people's lives upside down, or probably brought it to a screeching halt. So you're no longer working, you're no longer employed. Or maybe you are, but it's part-time, it's shifted, you're not bringing in as much money as you would before. You still have to provide, for your family, for your kids. And you're starting to challenge things about yourself because you're feeling now that you're inadequate. How would you, tell somebody to deal with that type of situation? Being stressed, being, in an anxious state just by the circumstance.
So, stressful circumstances, if we are not careful, they can cause us to spiral downward negatively. And so the direction of our thoughts could actually be purely negative. And a lot of the times in those moments when there are these external stressful events, we have to understand that we are still who we are. Because once you start doing this, it's easy to start thinking that you're nobody.
Right.
It's easy to start believing that I'm not good enough.
But in a situation like that, Josh, how do I bring myself back, to planting on solid ground and saying, okay, this is who I am. Don't be overwhelmed by this.
So you said, you said something that's quite interesting. You said, how do I bring myself back?
As the viewer.
Bringing myself back is actually quite difficult, because what we need in those moments is support.
Right.
Because funny thing is, what the stress does is somehow drives us to isolate, which makes it even worse. Because now, rather than having a conversation with you where I could be reassured, I'm sitting home all day with nothing but my negative thoughts. So we need to connect. If we in those moments we need to make or maintain connections.
Yeah. In a situation where people are quarantined though, or they're at home by themselves, what would you recommend? Because some people would prefer to have certain conversations in person,
Well, that's where adjustment comes. That's where adjustment comes in, because the fact is, I personally never accepted that we're practicing social distancing. It's physical distancing. Yeah. Because we can remain socially connected
without being physically
close. There, physically close. And I mean, yes, it's harder for some people, but the fact is, we have to adjust, and we can't say all or nothing. I mean, at least we have the ability to contact each other.
Yes.
And so that is going to have to work for us.
What would you say to the people who consider themselves to be self-soothers? People who would think to themselves, okay, I'll go through this process, I'll figure it out, I'll deal with it. I don't need to speak up. I don't need to say that I'm feeling, I don't want to be perceived as weak if I tell someone that I'm not feeling, completely sure about myself.
Yeah. See, there's a myth that resilience means brushing it aside, toughing it out, not talking to anybody. But that's only going to wear a person down over time. And the truth is, there are things we can do to self-soothe. For example, if we're identifying, going back to the stress management, if we're identifying the faulty beliefs, if we're exercising, we're deep breathing, there are things we can actually do to self-soothe.
Right.
But ultimately, there is significant benefit in interacting.
Right.
Because you get a perspective apart from your own. Apart from that, it's just you and whatever is in your head.
And sometimes you could be your own worst enemy, you know, sitting there thinking about all the negative things.
Particularly because we are our worst critics. We usually are.
Yeah.
So we have to keep ourselves at bay.
And give ourselves a break sometimes.
Truly.
You know, don't be too hard on ourselves. That's very interesting, mind-blowing even. So speaking about, you know, stress and anxiety, you know, these things are often shown in different ways, but I know sometimes it could get severe to the point at which someone will have a panic attack.
Yeah.
Is there a way to stop that in its tracks or sense it happening? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so that one is heavy because there are more people than you would imagine experiencing panic attacks. What is a panic attack? It's just this abrupt surge of fear or discomfort, and again, there are symptoms of that as well. And for us to say this is a panic attack, you'd have to have at least 4 out of 13 symptoms present. So, for example, you have a choking sensation, sweating, hot and cold flashes, heart palpitations, stomach discomfort, chest pain, headache, fear of dying, fear of losing control, or fear of the person would fear losing their mind. And when these things are present, we have a panic attack. They come without warning, you know. It's not like you could see it coming. But usually a panic attack would indicate that there are some stressors that you need to manage.
Right.
There's some stress that you need to deal with. In some cases, there are also physical causes, and it would be important to see a doctor to address or rule out any physical cause. But the challenge is, after experiencing the first panic attack, persons actually have panic attacks in the future because they are worried about having another one.
Oh.
So just the fear of having another panic attack causes a panic attack.
To have another panic attack.
What also happens is people begin displaying these avoidant behaviors because they want to avoid having a panic attack at all costs. So if there's a situation that might be stressful, whether it be public speaking, they would avoid stressful situations. They would also avoid situations that would cause them to be active physically.
Right.
Why? Because of the physical symptoms that accompany panic attacks, and because normal bodily functions and activity is now seen as a sign of a panic attack. Yes, if I walk up Market Hill, my heart will race. But if I'm worried about having a panic attack, my heart racing is not normal anymore. Or some discomfort in my stomach isn't normal anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's very important to guide people in the direction of normalizing things that were normal before.
Yeah, that's very important. And you say normalizing things that were normal before.
Yeah, because of the overwhelming fear of having another panic attack associated with the embarrassment of having a panic attack in a crowd, people wondering what's wrong with me, people might think I'm crazy.
Right.
So many people actually, in plain sight, fight these internal battles and nobody around them knows or notices.
Yeah. And then so that brings me to my next question, because you could be living in a household, you know, with someone, a brother, a sister, a spouse, and they may be, you know, fighting an internal battle and you're not aware. How do we identify that, to be more aware of the people that are around us and the things that they may be going through?
Wow. So, of course, understanding the symptoms of depression, the symptoms of panic attacks, would definitely give a person a keen eye. You know, based on what they see happening, they won't just brush it off. But also, I would say it's important to be a bit more communicative in the household.
Right.
Right? So that I mean, ideal situation, every household is a place where people feel safe and they feel supported by each other. So
in an
that
ideal situation.
ideal, I'm saying ideal, right? But even where that does not exist, no, the fact is people are not doomed to have a broken home for the rest of their lives.
Right.
A turnaround can be made. Because it would be unfortunate for a child to be experiencing panic attacks, for example, or even depression, and the parents not noticing at all.
Yeah.
Or they don't feel safe to say, this is what I'm going through. But you know what? Even outside of the home, worst case scenario, if support is not an option at home, at least outside of home, there can be someone
right
who can offer support, someone that's available to talk.
Right. And oftentimes I think people would lean on a friend. You know, I know in certain circumstances it's easy to talk to somebody that you've been close with, somebody you know since primary school, secondary school. You probably met someone at work, a co-worker, and it's easy to talk to them. At what point is relying on your friend too much? At what point do you know, or is there an indicator that goes off that lets you know that you need professional help?
Well, the fact is, professional help is always a good idea, and I'm not advocating for myself.
Right.
But because I seek professional help as well. So your friends, the persons who are close to you, kudos to them and the support that they give, the support they offer. But sometimes the closeness of the relationship could actually remove the objectivity.
Right.
Right? So that they will not be 100% objective in the conversation. Also, the reality is what the professional is going to do is provide a structured approach to help you navigate whatever that situation is. Your friends, and again, power to the friends, but they're really just doing what they can.
Yeah.
And of course, without them, all would be lost because we need them. But then the professional steps in, who is an objective bystander, and who gives you the structure required to navigate through whatever that issue is. That is also very powerful.
Yeah. You said something there that we definitely need to elaborate more on in terms of seeking professional help. But remember that you can contact us on our WhatsApp number 414-2285. 414-2285. For those of you that want to WhatsApp us and you're outside of Grenada as a territory, put a 1473 in front of it. So that's 1473-414-2285. And you can WhatsApp us your questions so we can give you some real responses on the spot. And Josh could let you know if you have to, you know, book a session at Optimal Solutions and talk to him a little bit more. But we really want to get into those questions. And we're using WhatsApp, of course, because we want to ensure that your questions, you know, are anonymous. If you want to be very honest and very candid with us about the situation that you're presently experiencing, we welcome that, and that's why we give you the anonymity of WhatsApp. So feel free to contact us. Josh, you were talking about seeking, you know, professional help and at the point at which you need that structured approach. But being very frank, you know, in the Caribbean, in Grenada, or even generally, there is a stigma associated with seeking, you know, psychotherapy.
So let me start with the good news first.
Yes.
Because I have been practicing in Grenada, say, for the past 4 years.
Yes.
And today, we are way better than we were 4 years ago.
Excellent.
People are a lot more open
Excellent.
to the idea of actually receiving counseling and psychotherapy. The next reality is, though, the stigma still exists.
Yeah.
And when we stigmatize, a stigma is really a mark of disgrace that we associate with people or even with a neighborhood. But it's just this mark of disgrace that we put on them that serves to separate us from them, to say that we are okay, they are not. Everything is okay with us, but these people are, right? So we stigmatize in that way.
Yeah.
The challenge is stigma dehumanizes people. It can easily cause us to start looking at people as if they're less than human. It also discourages people from seeking the help that they need, lest someone finds out they see a therapist, oh, he must be crazy.
To just have a structured conversation and work out something that you're thinking about in your head.
Yeah, we even stigmatize the word mental.
Right.
Which is something else.
It's true, because if someone will see someone acting out of character and they're like, that person is mental.
So, but we don't ascribe the same stigma to the word physical.
Right.
When mental simply means related to the mind, and physical related to the body.
Yeah.
So there's no need to stigmatize the word mental. And this is the challenge which has actually caused a lot of people to suffer in silence even up until they die. And I mean, the good news is we're making progress. And you know, with forums like these, we can definitely demystify the idea. Because
based on what I'm hearing, you know, your mental is just another part of your being, just as your physical is.
Correct.
But oftentimes we don't name it like that.
No, we don't.
We don't say it like that. And because of that, there's all kinds of nomas that's associated with it. And then we often, you know, second guess ourselves. And to be honest, checking in on our mental self is just as important as checking in on our physical self. Going to the gym and not checking on your mental, you know, health. Are you really healthy?
Not entirely. Because your mind has a way of running the show. Weak mind, weak body. Here's another sad reality when it comes to the stigma. The stigma assumes that, well, for the person stigmatizing, they assume that they are immune.
Right.
That they're mentally healthy now and forever. When if we think back on the continuum of mental health, right, you might be a few symptoms away from being diagnosed with clinical depression. Or you might be a stressful event away from developing a panic disorder.
Yeah.
So the fact is, nobody is entirely safe from or immune to mental issues. And we need to understand that, which means that we need to start looking at people who have mental issues with more concern for their condition and compassion. Because stigma will definitely disappear if we end up in that situation, or our family member, and suddenly we don't want the public to stigmatize us.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So when it's closer to home, it's easier for us to really put a face on it. And then, you know, but if you see someone else, it's like, oh, that's them. That's just a crazy person, you know?
And crazy is a crazy word. You know, crazy, referring to somebody who is mentally ill as crazy is actually...
It's insensitive.
I was trying to find a word, but yeah, I'll go with that one. Insensitive.
And then it's a blanket statement that you put on someone that...
So you sign them off.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. And, you know, how do stereotypes... I know that you were speaking specifically about, you know, you would have certain stigmas and it would really like turn people off of seeking help. But labeling things, you know, labeling someone crazy, that specific stereotype, and taking into consideration what people are facing now.
Yeah.
You know, and then you may see in the news that someone committed suicide. And you think, could that person have been helped? Is there something that could have been done? Someone in the community to notice, a family member, a friend, you know? Let's talk a little bit about that, because in Grenada specifically, we've had more than, you know, even though it's present and it's just in the beginning of the year, maybe the statistics would show that other years it's present as well. But I can remember or recall 3 cases or instances where suicide was associated, you know, with someone or with a circumstance, an attempted suicide, or someone actually, you know, went all the way. How do we recognize that? And if we ourselves are experiencing suicidal thoughts, how do we catch that?
Well, let me start with the last question. If we're experiencing suicidal thoughts, people usually know when they're thinking about dying. That's bottom line. They know when they've gotten to the place where they actually want to die, and they're perhaps thinking about how to get it done. The person would know. Because suicide is not an unconscious activity. It's something that is consciously done.
Yeah.
But before it gets there, if we look back to some of the symptoms of depression, feeling worthless, hopelessness, there's also inappropriate guilt, for example. There are some similarities. If we tie it back to depression, there are some similarities that we can see. There's a general theme within suicide notes. People are saying they're worthless, they're a shame, they're an embarrassment to their family. They are also saying they're just taking up space. Everybody would be happy without them.
And just sometimes these thoughts exist in your head, but are not existing in real life. Because if you think that you're worthless, does that necessarily mean that you're worthless?
No. And you know what? It's proven that people who are on the brink of committing suicide, also, if they are distracted, if they're distracted at the right time, it could actually stop them from following through. Right? And in a sense, of course, there's a sense in which we cannot be everywhere. Even if we're supportive, the fact is somebody can still trail off on their own and harm themselves. But in the process, it's important to begin to identify behaviors that are linked to suicidal ideation, because people who begin to self-harm are getting closer to committing the act, because that takes some courage.
So it's like you're warming yourself
working
up.
your way towards that moment where you're actually bold enough to do it, by harming yourself a bit more over time.
So that now follows through to, if we see or we recognize someone cutting themselves, for example.
So let's be frank. What would we typically do if we notice someone is cutting themselves?
Sometimes, Josh, I don't want to say it, but sometimes we just mind our own business and keep pushing. If we don't know the person, if we just notice that, we just see that.
Okay, so if you don't know them, it's a bit challenging.
It's a bit challenging.
But if a parent notices a child cutting themselves,
you tell them, stop doing that. Why are you doing that? Stop doing that. Why are you doing that? Stop it.
Stop it.
That's what you say.
And then?
And you tell them, stop it, and you move on.
See, that's the challenge. If you notice someone has begun to harm themselves, that is something that should not be taken lightly.
Yeah.
It definitely should not, because if you take it lightly, it means that you are causing this situation to actually to be prolonged, and it could ultimately lead to that person harming themselves, or worse, committing suicide. So someone who is self-harming needs help. And let me say this, I just want us to stop looking at it as something that is embarrassing, right? Because nobody knows what a person is going through but that person.
That person. That's interesting. And that is the crucial point right there.
So I would encourage parents also, you want to be sure that you don't hide your child harming themselves, because you don't want people to find out.
Because oftentimes a parent may take on the embarrassment of something that the child is doing. So you see your child, you know, cutting themselves, or your adolescent cutting yourself, and you start to question, am I not a good parent? Is this something with, and then you're faced with these, you know, issues that you're experiencing internally, and then you're like, well, no, you know, you have that conflict within yourself. So instead you say, stop doing that, and you try to hide it, or try to keep that child away from getting the help that they may need.
That child needs the help like yesterday. Immediately. The moment you see self-harm, and you would know self-harm looks a particular way. Yes, I can bump into something and get bruised, but self-harm definitely looks different.
Let's jump into WhatsApp for a little while, because it's just buzzing off and going in, and this person says, good night, my daughter sometimes cuts herself, but her excuse was she just wanted to see what it feels like. She don't talk much and keeps it to herself. How should I deal with this situation? I myself have serious problems sometimes. I tried it before.
Okay. So, in a case like that, it's, and I don't want to offer therapy via this medium.
Yeah.
But it would be important for both mother and daughter to actually seek help.
Seek help.
Yeah.
In that situation.
Because the next reality is that when a child is a client, the parent is also a client, because the parent is the child's guardian. So after you work with the child, when they leave you, the parent has to actually take over.
Right.
So the parent is a client as well. If in the case of a minor, that is, somebody underage, then the parent or parents would be a client as well.
Yeah. So Josh's recommendation for that would be to seek help immediately.
Particularly because of the silence.
Yeah.
That is a bit.
The silence is
troublesome.
A strong indicator of something more. So that is the recommendation, and like yesterday. So you're tuned into this for a reason. This is possibly for you. Reach out and seek help. Josh was just saying that he himself, you know, has a therapist.
And I guess there's no shame in therapy for me.
There's no shame in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely seek help. Optimal Solutions, we have the contact information. You could feel free, check them out, or even send them an email or a call. We have the information. We'll share it on the screen, but you can send an email, info.optimalsolutionsgnd@gmail.com. That's the email address. Reach out. Let's take another question. How do I help someone who is depressed and in their mood, or depression drains my energy? What are some of the ways or suggestions for an individual to effectively manage stress? So those are two questions that one person asked. But the first one is essentially, how do they prevent someone's depressive mood from draining their energy?
Wow. So, you know, that's a big question, because, I mean, professionally, there are things that I would do to guard against being drawn in. Now, if this is somebody that you are close to, then you're actually going to have to set some boundaries for yourself. And if we look back to the idea of self-care in order to be effective, if you don't set that boundary and you allow that person to drain you out, then you're also not going to be of much help to them anymore.
So the power again lies with you to understand, you know, how that is affecting you, and not allow it to do so.
Yeah, and then you also have to be able to, when I say boundaries, I mean as if you are available 24/7, it means that you're pretty much a hotline.
So you're that go-to person for that person.
No, I'm not saying become unavailable. But at some point, if you're always available, how do you tend to yourself? And once you see it this way, tending to myself is going to help me manage helping this person,
Right.
then it's actually quite powerful to practice self-care.
Mm-hmm. So there you definitely go. The boundaries are very important. Yeah. And then the second part of the question was, what are some of the ways or suggestions an individual can effectively manage stress? You hinted to some of that earlier on, probably the person just joined in. So.
Oh yeah. So I guess I can reiterate.
Mm-hmm.
I hope all of it makes sense. If a person has just joined, we spoke about managing expectations,
Yeah.
ensuring that your expectations are not unreasonable. We spoke about exercise, self-care,
Mm-hmm.
as I just mentioned, learning to say no.
That's a big thing, you know, Josh.
Learning to say no. A lot of people are stressed out because they cannot say no.
They like saying yes or being there for people, and they think that to do that you have to say yes all the time. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, what I would say is this: if you keep on giving and you're not receiving, and people keep on knocking, eventually you could find yourself in a position where you resent those people. Not that you want to be there,
But it eventually happens, and none of us want that. So it's very important for us to find those times and just check on it.
because I don't know. I haven't met a person who is the savior of the world, and I'm not even being mean when I say that.
Mhm.
But it's just for us to understand how critical it is for us to take care of ourselves.
Very important. And I'm pausing because I really wanted to resonate with people that a lot of the times you really need to take that time for yourself. Concentrate on yourself and then see how you can be there for that person. Again, the scenario with the airplane. Put on your oxygen mask first. And then assist the people who are next to you. Speaking, the individual that we spoke to that commented before and asked about her daughter, she said that sometimes she feels as though there is no one to help because the space, you know, is so small, and she has experienced different forms of abuse as well, and it's damaging to her, and she feels as though people treat her badly. So again, the physical space, Josh, may not have anything to do with it. It's just a matter of reaching out and seeking that professional help.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, of course, you know, we can't go too. We definitely can't go too deep with that. But just listening to the circumstance, it's definitely a cause to reach out for professional help.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to take some more of these questions really quickly. If someone has a sleeping problem for over 10 years, would you consider that as depression?
Well, not automatically.
Because the other signs.
Not automatically. I mean, there are physical contributors to that as well. So it would require a meeting, an interview with that person,
Right.
to find out where they are and what their experience is before saying that this is depression.
That this is depression. So this could be more, it could be depression, but it could be something else. So again, the recommendation is to seek, you know, professional help.
I would
just
say the
have that
first thing,
conversation.
you know, in a case like that, seek a doctor, first of all, because physical issues contribute to sleeplessness as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. That's your advice. Someone says, I'm often stressed because I am trying to help out the adults in my family who are not willing to take the required actions to improve their life. At what point do I know I can't do everything for them?
Well, you see, here's something that nobody can do. Nobody can change a person's mind. We give suggestions, but we cannot change a person's mind.
The onus is on them.
The onus is on them. And so in a case like that, particularly if you're fighting this battle for years and years, then at some point you have to well, not even at some point. Up front, you have to recognize that the responsibility is theirs and not yours. If you carry the responsibility, then it's going to stress you out. But you're doing your part. You can give suggestions, but it's their responsibility. And if they are not taking responsibility, then what's left to do? There's actually not much that's left to do.
Yeah,
no, I will not make recommendations. I will not say stop trying.
Right. Right.
But even as you're trying, you just need to understand. Ultimately, their responsibility will result in their responsible actions, or it will result in change.
In change.
If not, then
just manage your expectations.
Manage your expectations.
Yeah. Let's take another question. Can the death of a loved one push you into depression or even having anxiety attacks where you experience palpitations of the heart regularly?
Definitely. Definitely, the death of a loved one can result in depression, because remember, someone dies, it's a stressful experience, right? And I really want us to identify the culprit, the stress, right? Yes, we grieve, but there's a level of stress in that. And if the stress is not managed, also if the death of that loved one is not resolved, then it becomes easier to develop other stress-related disorders, other stress-related issues, whether depression, whether anxiety. So primarily what's of paramount importance is for the death of this loved one to be resolved.
Yeah.
Because grieving is a process, and people go through the process. Of course, you can't put a time on it, right? Because people grieve differently. But the goal is that people go through the process in a healthy way.
Okay. And
come out. Of course, you don't ever stop missing somebody. But what would happen is when you remember them, you can smile, remember the good times, as opposed to being overwhelmed by sadness. That is after the process you navigate the grieving process in a healthy way. Okay.
This person asks, does a secular approach to psychotherapy work 100% all the time? And how do we feel about non-secular approaches to psychotherapy?
So, let me see. Are we good?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a Christian. I'm a believer, right? And I do not say I offer secular psychotherapy, but there's a reality, and that's this: we do not impose what we believe on our clients. If a client wants to go that route, then sure.
Yeah.
But if not, then we don't broach a subject that the client is uncomfortable with. If a person wants what you would call spiritual counseling, then there are people they could go to for that.
Right.
But apart from that, approaches work. You know, I cannot say that a secular approach will not work.
Right.
Approaches work for different people.
So essentially, people have to find what they're comfortable with.
They have to find what they're comfortable with.
Try it, and then if it doesn't work, you move on. You try something else. We're strapped for time here, but this last question, this woman said, please, how do you deal with being home with the kids all day? The stress associated with that.
Wow. No, I definitely, for people who have that issue, I definitely empathize with them, because I'm just imagining being in a space and children are running around for the entire day and they're draining your energy. I think most importantly, it's a good time to develop some routines.
Yeah.
Right? So that the children understand this is how the day is going to go. Because if not, then it's going to be chaos.
Yeah.
And of course, make it interactive, make it fun, but you want to develop routines so that the children are not running wild.
Yeah, I saw my sister doing that with her son. She developed a timetable, so she said, okay, you're going to do this from this time to this time. And I had to schedule anti-time on that list as well.
Correct.
for the FaceTime, so he knows, okay, it's anti-time on the timetable, otherwise, you know, you're going to go crazy. Josh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You know, thank you so much. Just in your closing remarks, is there anything, you know, general that you just want to say to wrap up the points and some of the issues that you've heard here? So many people have so many other questions. I will give them your contact, you know, Optimal Solutions contact information. You can direct your questions there, but just to round off this session.
Yeah, if I could recap and make it quick. I would encourage us all, myself included, to take back the control that we've given away. Right? Yes, life is stressful, but we want to ensure that our internal environment is, in the midst of the chaos, that our internal environment is at peace. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for us to navigate. It's going to be difficult for us to be effective, and we need to ensure that we remain in control of how we feel. Yes, things will rock our world, but we have to, as much as possible, remain in control of how we feel. And lastly, it is high time to end stigma. Right? I think that we're getting to a place now where we can understand that mental is not a bad word. Just because physical illness is not a bad word, mental illness is also not a bad word. And the same way we can go to a medical doctor for our physical issues, nothing is wrong with seeking help for our mental issues.
Definitely, definitely. You know, my strong takeaways from this, again, managing that expectation, that really resonated. And just from some of the questions that came in, you know, some of these things could start with managing those expectations. So I know that people would definitely take that. Your control, which is important and internal to you, I think that's very strong. And then the stigma, when you consider everything that's going on right now, I think everyone's continuum has been rocked. You know, and we see it through the news. You know, we were hyper anxious about COVID even before it got to Grenada, just looking at the world situation, it being here now with the US and in Grenada and in the Caribbean. We have so many family members, you know, in the US. So sometimes the pain and the stress that they experience is experienced right here with us, you know. So there's a lot, you know, that's happening and that people have to deal with right now. But I think it's important for people to understand that you are not alone.
Definitely
not. You are not alone. We are all experiencing different levels of this at different times.
This is one time when the phrase "we're all in this together" actually
it's not a cliche.
It's not a cliche. We are it together.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to thank Josh, Hector, counseling psychologist. I mean, I feel like we could go on and on and on and have these continue having these conversations. Thank you so much for the questions that you've sent in. I try to get to as much of them as possible. There are some others. So what I would leave you with is the information for Optimal Solutions and their services. You can contact Josh and his teams for the great work that they're doing in counseling psychotherapy. Their email again is info.optimalsolutionsgnd@gmail.com, or you can contact them 443-2894. That's the landline. Or you can WhatsApp, just like you were WhatsApping us. It's the 21st century, to 421-6159. The WhatsApp cell, again, 421-6159. In destigmatizing mental health, conversations such as this are very important. And as a brand, Ariza Credit Union recognizes the necessity for having these conversations in fostering holistic development. It's very important because, as Josh brought to the fold today, there are several things that affect people at different stages in their life, and it's important to understand that we are all in this together. As an inclusive brand as an inclusive credit union, it's very important to understand that we must be compassionate for the people around us. We must leverage the resources that we have around us to help each other out during these times. So I'm so thankful for Ariza Credit Union for making this conversation possible. There were so many people that gave realistic experiences that they're going through right now. And we have to understand, if we have to achieve our goals or even attain financial wellness and financial freedom, it's very important that we focus on our mental health in our holistic development. So again, we hope that this discussion was resourceful to you, and remember that you are not alone. We want to thank again Josh, the entire team at Optimal Solutions. We also thank again to you, our viewers on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. Such a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us your questions. Those of you that need to seek extra help, it's okay. It's okay. The counseling psychologist has a therapist. It is okay. And then we want to thank TRN Communications, our production team, you know, making sure that this live stream was going good and ensure that all of you were able to hear and be a part of this conversation, a part of this discourse. For more information about upcoming initiatives such as these, stay connected to Ariza's digital platforms. So that's Ariza Credit Union on Facebook, at Ariza CU on Instagram, and also you can check out their website, arizacu.com. My name is Akira. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day and guidance in your goings.
Ariza says, thank you